Hi, I'm Lisa K. Donner, along with Jeff Charles, Sarah Cowgill, Scott Cosenza, and Tim Donner. And this is the Conservative Five, Liberty Nation's online TV news program. It seems that one state in the union has decided to throw it down and let it rip on issues that affect their citizens. Surprised to hear it's Texas? Lone Star State is going to finish Donald Trump's big, beautiful wall and tackle human trafficking, something no one else seems to be addressing in the swamp. It appears Governor Greg Abbott is making headlines and putting his cowboy boot down on anyone who would mess with Texas. So I'd like to start this discussion with our senior political analyst, Tim Donner. It appears Abbott is taking an in-your-face stance with the Biden folks. What do you think, Tim?
I think it's notable that the governors of the two most important Republican states are rising fast. Ron DeSantis and Greg Abbott. Though Abbott, I have to say, finished nowhere among the top candidates in a recent straw poll at the Western Conservative Summit, something that Jeff wrote about me as well. But he's never hinted at presidential aspirations, but I'm sure that the moves he's making to continue building the wall, which was, of course, the signature proposal, the signature project of Donald Trump, has made him extremely popular in MAGA country, to say the least. Now, while he's never hinted at presidential aspirations, he's never rejected such a thought either. But it's interesting to note, while Abbott wasn't among the top five finishers in that Western Conservative Summit straw poll, which is essentially a beauty contest. It has no significant meaning in the long run. But the top five finishers in that were all MAGA friendly, all pro-Trump, essentially type of candidates. Also notable that Nikki Haley finished 13th. And the reason I say that is because she's considered maybe the lone hope of the old GOP neoconservative establishment, and her candidacy, if she ever had thoughts of it, is obviously going nowhere. And what that means is that Liz Cheney and company have been steamrolled into oblivion, while Greg Abbott, Ron DeSantis, and the other MAGA-friendly candidates are at the head of the list.
What do you make of that, Sarah?
I don't know. Maybe Abbott's simply looking for a step up on a ticket in a big way. I mean, it doesn't have to be he has presidential aspirations. It could be he has other aspirations. And what I do know is that he is taking MAGA country and going, pedal to the metal with this. It's obvious if like I just drove through Texas, mostly the state, and they love him there, and they are promoting his policies, and they're cheering him on. There are billboards all over the place saying, "Look what we do because we care, and we're going to take care of this problem." It's quite a phenomena down there, and I don't think. Maybe he's just being a good governor, or maybe he's looking for a loftier perch. I don't think he's got presidential aspirations. I think he might want to be a number two guy and work his way up that way, or he might even want to look at other, cabinet kind of positions. I'm not sure.
Trump,
Sarah,
DeSantis.
one second, Tim. Sarah, I'm going to follow this up because you were saying you just drove through Texas, and you also saw a lot of human trafficking signs or what's going on in Texas about?
Well, let's remember when President Trump was in office, he talked about trafficking. He talked about the kids at the border. He talked about the big holes. Everybody else was glossing over that in the Democratic Party, saying, let everybody in, these poor people, this is what we're all about. President Trump focused a lot on trafficking. Well, Texas is also focused on trafficking. And I went through the I-40 corridor, and that's east-west. And that is a major highway and it's out in the, there's not a lot of roads or not a lot of towns in this part of the world. And it's a major trafficking highway. All your trucks are running, you see random things that make you go, thinking about who's in that car with those kids, why that doesn't,
You're talking about human
right.
trafficking, right?
I'm talking about human trafficking. And every road stop, every bathroom, every place on I-40, not in the towns, not offshoots, every place on I-40 that you'd walk into, in the stalls were advertising. If you've got a problem, here's what you do. Here's your tips to get out of it. Here's what you can do. Here's the code where you can say. I mean, they had it all over, and they're really making an effort everywhere you went. In a hotel room, they were looking at IDs. They were asking where you're from, where you're going, who's in your party. They're definitely on top of this. Every other state that I went through, nothing.
Is there any evidence to indicate the efforts
just
in
didn't say
Texas are
anything.
bearing fruit with respect to trafficking issues?
Do what?
Is there any indication that the efforts that you've described in Texas regarding trafficking is bearing some fruit?
I just noticed it. I haven't, and I was thinking about digging into it a little bit more, since I seem to know some people in the area that I can, get some information out of, or just go straight to the governor's office itself. I hadn't done that yet. It literally was just on the roads to and from that I noticed there were only in the state of Texas were people trying to identify and help and secure and give you the information you needed if you were A, being trafficked, or B, thought, see something, say something. So I really thought that was interesting. No other state has that in their rest stops. Missouri didn't have it. Arkansas didn't have it.
Jeff is the only one here who actually lives in Texas. So we're
Yeah, human trafficking is a huge problem in the state. So I'm not surprised to hear what you're talking about, Sarah. I'm not surprised at all. And as far as numbers that Scott brought up, when I looked into this probably a year or two ago, it seemed like it was starting to bear some fruit, but I haven't looked at it recently. A lot of the programs that they're putting into place are fairly new. So I expect that it's going to do something. I just don't know how much it's going to do. But yeah, human trafficking, it's all across the country, but especially in border states like Texas, it's I hate to use the word rampant, but it's borderline rampant. I mean, it's so bad that people could be living next to a slave and not even knowing it. And most people aren't aware of human trafficking. They think that it's just something that happens in other countries and that it only happens a little bit here. And that's why it's so important for organizations that are increasing awareness to be more showcased, because this is a huge and serious problem in the United States in general. So I'm glad to see more people out there making people aware of how extensive the issue is.
We talked about this for Jeff and I talked about this for a little while last week on The Uprising, a podcast of LibertyNation.com. And one of the things that I didn't get to mention to Jeff in that conversation, I do want to say now, is this is like such a hot topic that prosecutors and police get a lot of juice from talking about human trafficking and describing their efforts against it. So while I don't know anything about what the numbers in Texas indicate, I do know that time after time after time, I see prosecutors on podiums with TV cameras around them talking about human trafficking. And then when it comes time to charge people, there's no trafficking charge whatsoever. This is like the Robert Kraft situation, you may recall, in Florida, where he was, at the massage parlor with the Chinese immigrant. They were talking about that like it was a human slave ring. Meanwhile, it was some 45-year-old Chinese immigrant who'd been in this country for 20 years and owned, quite a bit of property, who's not trafficked at all. And there was no charge that was actually brought. So I was kind of forever skeptical about those charges or those allegations without charges to accompany them.
The problem is that you've got 3 states, Texas, Arizona, and California in particular, that are subject to illegal immigration, and they can't really control it themselves because immigration is a federal issue. So they're at the mercy of the federal government to a large extent. And this is the frustration of Greg Abbott, the governor of Texas, and the citizens of Texas, that they can't just take complete charge of the situation themselves because they're so subject to federal regulations and the federal policies promoted by the Biden administration.
It's always such a disappointment for these executives that they can't take complete control themselves.
Well, and the other issue too that a lot of people don't know about is that we talk a lot about human trafficking coming from the border, which that makes up a huge chunk of it. But a lot of kids who are trafficked and people who are trafficked, they're Americans. I mean, they recently just busted up a ring in the Bay Area in California, because California has a lot of trafficking issues as well. And they were essentially running a brothel with children. And a lot of these are Americans. So it's all across the board. And I agree with what you said, Scott. I mean, I think that there are a lot of people who are kind of virtue signaling with this, but not really cracking down. But I know in some areas they are. So it's just a matter of, I mean, it is a federal issue, but it's also a state issue and a local issue as well. And a lot of times the local, state, and federal law enforcement agencies will collaborate to break up a lot of these rings that are going on.
Okay, well, let me just make a point about this. Texas I-40 corridor, and I-40 runs east-west. It's a big area, and that's where a lot of these people are getting on and off. But once you got out of Texas, for instance, I-40 in New Mexico, problems with the Native Americans that live there. And I'm not saying they're trafficking people. I'm saying they're victims of trafficking. For instance, you go to Stanley, New Mexico on I-40 and stop at the Pilot Rest Stop or whichever one it is there. I don't remember. That's where Jeffrey Epstein had Zorro Ranch. You don't see squat about trafficking there. Why not? Wouldn't they want to be, oh my gosh, we got to get a handle on this. We had to have Jeffrey Epstein and a 25,000 square foot trafficking ranch. New Mexico. What the heck?
Well, we're going to have to leave it there. One thing is for certain, Texas is taking a leading role in getting a few things straightened out. Illegal immigration is costing this country big, and it's just gone off the charts since Joe Biden took office. And really, if the Biden administration and the so-called border czar, Kamala Harris, won't even visit the state, much less do anything about it, I say God bless Texas. That's it for our Conservative 5 panel today. Check out our other C5 shows and segments on your favorite video platform, YouTube, Vimeo, Rumble. We're on them all. As well, Liberty Nation has its own Roku channel where you can see all our TV productions. Thanks so much for tuning in, and remember to surf on over to libertynation.com. Sign up for our new member zone, just $29.99 for the entire year. This has been a production of libertynation.com, conservative news where truth matters.